All right, so welcome to our online visitors, all of you mobile employees. How much we appreciate you, love you, and miss you. Also, welcome to our Lawrenceburg crew. We miss you as well. We see you all the time digitally. We're with you in spirit. Here we go. So, I wonder if this is playing in the lobby right now. That would be weird. They'd be like, who's talking? All right, so today we're talking about a little concept of moving the needle. And we're talking about moving the needle because this section, or building a firm foundation in our kind of framework is building teamwork, is really having practical steps, practical ideas to engage with each other better as a team. So last week we talked about trust, how we build trust, how we formulate trust. This week we're going to talk about how to have a little bit of conflict, how to have a difficult conversation with those on the team, and how to not make it a big deal. Because ultimately, all we really want to do when we're working in a dynamic environment with human beings is what? We want to move the needle, okay? So when it comes to feedback in general, guess what? It's difficult. It's hard. It's not the best. I'll give you an example. So, I don't know, a few weeks ago, in my household, right around 8 p.m., we have family devotion time. And this takes place right outside of the kids' room. There are 2 armchairs, and there's 3 children. There's 4, but the other one doesn't really read, write, or think in clear sentences. And I'll tell you an example of that in just a second. So there's a potential problem. 3 children, which are part of the discipleship or the devotional time, and 2 chairs. So as you can imagine, every once in a while, more often than not, Aaron and I will be sitting on the couch having a discussion about our days or whatever, and then all of a sudden we will hear conflict begin upstairs. And then it typically is, that's my chair. No, 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 that's my chair. No, 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 that don't kick me. Don't hit me. Now, does it sound like that reserved? No, it's usually screaming. This particular evening, let me explain to you what happened. I have 3 children. The oldest is Reed. The middle one is Gage. Middle one again, Remy Jean. And then we've got May May. May May is 3 years old. So Reed sits in a chair. He gets up to go to the bathroom, and the 2 other children arrive. They take the 2 empty chairs. Reed returns to the scene to find his chair has been taken. Obviously very upset at this point. Instead of having a moving the needle conversation, he decides to engage in violence. And what that looks like is pulling his sister out of the chair. Now, his 8-year-old sister decides to respond in kind. And being the strong, much more athletic female that she is than they are, she decides to attack the weaker of the 2 and goes after the 10-year-old. At which point he is sitting here getting ready for devotion. He's very studious, so he has his Bible. He's turning it, and all of a sudden there's an 8-year-old girl on top of him pulling him out of the chair, at which he exclaims, "This is an injustice to the highest degree. I've been sitting here minding my own business, and now this little hyena is on top of me." So it sounds like, that's my chair, that's my chair. Ah, ah, ah. And so Aaron and I are like, they're going to work it out. You know, we've equipped them with the tools they need to resolve conflict. This is not happening. Louder and louder and louder. I'm like, all right, here comes Father to the rescue to mitigate this conflict. And much to my surprise, the 3-year-old was already attempting to mitigate the conflict by having her pants off and turning around to the children and grabbing her gluteus maximus and saying, "Booty, booty, booty." And I said, out of all 4 of you, she's the only one creating some positive energy in this place. Because I like what's happening here in the cute way, but I don't like what's happening here. But what she was trying to do is resolve the conflict, right? In the best way a 3-year-old knows how to do. Now, if you think about that idea in its most simple form, it's somebody did something that infringed upon someone else, right? Somebody sat in Reed's chair. He felt like it was his, and he had to have a difficult conversation or a feedback conversation where he said, "Hey, you're doing something that's not right." Now, the person that did that had no idea. They didn't realize that was his chair. She just sat down. What happens when we find ourselves in those situations is that it always leads to some type of emotional conflict in ourselves. And typically, if we're giving feedback, we tend to overbrace and compensate for the resistance that we're going to receive. And if we're receiving feedback, we unintentionally respond with defensiveness. Okay? So what I want to do is take a moment for us to all understand that's normal, and then we have to realize that there's nothing we can do to avoid it. That when we have a conversation that Reed or Gage or Remy would needed to have had that evening with a peer or with a boss or with a coworker, it's going to cause some emotional turmoil. So I want to give us a system to have a conversation like that doesn't cause as much. We're not going to eliminate it. It's not going to go all the way away, but we're giving ourselves a framework so we can work within this trusted framework and make it work a little better, because the goal is to move the needle. So I want to understand one little piece of this before we get into it, and that's Proverbs 17:17. Anybody know which core value this is tied to? Not all at once. They all screamed at me, inspiring friends, so I hope you got that all at home too. Proverbs 17:17 says that a friend is a friend at all times, but a brother is born for adversity, meaning that a brother, somebody who's really, really close to us, is one who understands that in human nature there's going to be conflict and there's going to be turmoil, and that we understand, hey, I'm working with a person, not a robot. We're going to have problems. But I get it. And I'm going to be there when you're at your deficit, and I'm also going to be there to pull you up from your deficit. So what does that look like? Well, feedback is a spectrum. And Morgan just talked about this a little bit, but some types of feedback don't need any type of matrix or system at all, right? I can come up to somebody and say, hey, you didn't fill that chart out right. And they can say, you know what, shoot, I didn't. Thank you so much. And that's it. We don't need to have any more dialogue than that. Don't need anything at all. Or I can say, hey, so-and-so, you didn't bill that claim right. You know what, I didn't bill that claim right. Shoot, we're done. Some conflict conversations are deeper. Somebody's continuing to have a problem over and over and over again. Okay, well, now it's time for compassionate conversation. Now we need to have a formal sit down where we both describe what we're experiencing, and then we come to a resolution and move forward. But then there is also the time for something in the middle. And this is honestly the type of conflict that I see most commonly in the workplace. It's not big enough to have this formal sit-down dialogue, but I did give feedback to this person, or I did say, hey, you did that wrong, and what I got back was resistance, or what I got back was disagreement, which is fine, but we haven't really moved on. Because my original attempt at saying, hey, that wasn't great, or hey, I didn't like your attitude, or hey, that wasn't done right, we missed it. We're still in it. So when we find ourselves in that situation, we want to have something in the in-between. And this conversation, moving the needle, should only be 3 minutes. It's a quick, hey, I tried something, it didn't work, now I want to have another conversation, and it's a quick and dirty 3-minute conversation. And I want you to think, move the needle. The first thing we want to do is disarm the tension that this creates. If I say to somebody, hey, I need to have a difficult conversation with you, all of a sudden, I'm going to get all tense. They're going to get really tense. Or if they say, hey, real quickly, can I give you some feedback? I'm going to get tense. They're going to get tense. We're going to start saying things. Somebody's going to get defensive. I'm going to get angry. They're going to get angry. It's not going to lead to something. I'll give you an example. If I was to come up to you after this meeting, tap you on the shoulder and say, hey, can I speak to you about 20 minutes at the end of the day? Where does your brain go? Does it go, I bet he's going to give me a raise? Or does it go, I'm going to get fired? Right? We all naturally go to, I'm going to start looking on ZipRecruiter. Right? That's just where our brains go. And I'm going to give you a little secret here. Managers, we do the same thing. If an employee comes up to us and says, hey, real quick, I need 20 minutes at the end of the day, they're quitting. They're looking for a new job. We all go to the negative, and that's just what we focus on as human beings. So if we have a framework that we can both mutually agree upon, it disarms the whole situation. So we can step outside of the human element and on to the problem. Because once we can say, all right, this person's talking to me because they care about the situation, they care about the patient issue, they care about the billing problem, they care about the charting problem, they don't care about me. They're not attacking me. They're just trying to make a situation better. And this is and I'll give you a little preview here. The higher or more intimate the relationship, the higher the stakes in the conversation, and the more that you have to separate the issue from the personal problem, okay? So the more intimate the relationship, the more this will play out. Okay, so I'm going to give you kind of this framework on how to do it. Remember that phrase. I want you to write this down on your paper. Move the needle. And these are the parts I want you to write down. I want you to write the word move, and I want you to write it as an acrostic. And I want you to write the word need, and I want you to write it as an acrostic or an acronym, either or. So, need, the giver's toolkit. So again, on your paper, you're going to write N-E-E-D or type it, which is my favorite. Again, this framework, maximum 3 minutes, and here's how it'll sound. The N stands for what's not working. We're all used to that, right? What's the thing that you've noticed is not where it needs to be? I'll give you some examples. The patient's chart wasn't updated before the visit, or your tone with that patient was kind of off. It sounded rushed or disgruntled. E stands for explore. Ask for their perspective. Why did this happen? What was going on when you spoke to them? What am I missing? Give me some perspective. The next E is empathize. Connect with their view. Don't try to correct it. Just say, for example, the chart wasn't updated or what happened. Yeah, I know the schedule's pretty tough when we see back-to-back patients. I'm empathizing. Or I get it that when we're really, really busy and we're backed up and there's 27 people in the lobby, it can be pretty tough, right? I see you, I understand why you did it, and I hear you. Okay, now, here comes the $1 million thing that you're going to do at the very end of this. The D stands for drop the drama. So what that means is, once you've said it, you're not going to say it again, and you're not going to go over to Susie Q or Billy B, two of my favorite employees, and re-communicate the issue. So I talked to Caitlin. She did not receive that feedback well. And let me tell you what she did, right? That's not what we're going to do, because all that does is perpetuate the situation. Now, this works regardless of the response. This is only for the giver, okay? So I'm going to role play, one of my worst qualities, I know. This working well for the giver and terrible for the receiver. So I can come up and say, hey, your tone with that last patient, not the best. What? I'm just going to say it again. Your tone with that last patient, not the best. What? Right? Now, second step. What was going on when you spoke with them? Well, they were like a total jerk. I mean, they were screaming at me. Their kid was running all over the room. And, I mean, like they're a jerk. Okay. I understand it can be very difficult to deal with hard patients sometimes. I've got difficult patients too. I just want you to know, it really kind of sounded to me like your tone was a little disrespectful. And now, what am I going to do? I'm dropping the drama. I'm walking away. Notice what I'm not doing. Now, I've told you this, and I would like to resolve the situation by both agreeing to a mutual way forward, right? I'm not doing that. I just communicated the problem. I empathized, and I understood, and I walked away. And I'm not going over to Susie Q, the star employee, and saying, guess what Billy B just said to me when I communicated this problem, okay? So that is the giver's framework. Now, what does the receiver do? The receiver is going to move. M-O-V-E. How to take the feedback gracefully. First thing first, you're going to mirror what you're being told. This is not the time to be defensive. This is not the time to be like, let me tell you something, bub. So, I'm going to give that feedback again. Your tone with that patient felt dismissive. So my tone came across as off to you. What's been going on when you spoke with them? Now, the next thing is nonverbal, but very important, because it's something that you're all going to want to do subconsciously. It's having an open posture. So when somebody says something that's very aggravating to us or potentially conflicting, the natural response for everyone in the entire world is to do this. It's a subconscious protection of your center mass, right? Or you'll do this. Or you'll turn slightly away from them. Or you'll furrow your brows. All of that is contracting. It's moving your posture inward. What I want you to be, like, if you can't control it, don't be Ricky Bobby. don't know what to do with my hands. You just put your hands in your pocket, like this. You can clasp your hands and put them in front of you, but you're communicating an open posture. Because subconsciously, if you cross your arms in front of somebody, they're going to cross their arms in front of you. And now you've got two closed-off people who are trying to have a conflicting conversation. You're just going to amplify the situation. And again, this conversation is 3 minutes or less. We're in and out, right? Because we're just going to move the needle and move on, okay? The third thing you're going to do is you're going to validate what's being said. What does the word validate mean? It's acknowledging the value that the person is presenting. Here's the deal. I think you had a bad tone with that patient. I don't have to agree necessarily with the fact that I had a bad tone with that patient, but I can acknowledge that it's important to have good tone with patients, right? You had a bad tone with that patient. Yeah, having the right tone of voice with a patient is really important, right? I'm validating that that's something important. Now, the last thing is empathy. I'm going to say that I understand what they're communicating to me, right? I'm going to say, I can see how my frustration might have spilled over. Or I'm going to say, I can see how what I said may have been interpreted that way. Now, listen to what I'm not doing. I'm not saying, thank you so much for bringing that up, and I promise going forward I'm not going to do that anymore. Right? Because we're not committing to anything. And I'm going to tell you why in just a second. This works regardless of the way it's being given. So, if Billy, the what, comes up to me with some feedback but doesn't do it in the right way, I can still receive it this way. Hey, your tone with that patient was terrible. My tone with the patient was bad. Yeah, you're a total jerk. Okay. It is very important to be good, nice and open and kind to patients. Stop being a jerk. I just want you to know that I really appreciate you bringing that up to me, and I really appreciate that feedback. I'm going to walk away. Okay, stop being a jerk. Okay. Now I'm going to walk away. Now, notice the receiver is independent of the giver in the way they both receive and give their feedback, and vice versa. So even if the person doesn't receive it well, the receiver doesn't give it well, the receiver still receives it. Even if the person doesn't receive it well, the giver still gives it that way. And it's all predicated on something called the power of positive intent. Now, right out of the gate, this is an idea, if you've never been introduced to it before, that you give to people who are on your team or who you have a relationship with. I would not give this to a used car salesman, okay? That wouldn't be wise. But the power of positive intent is something I'm going to give to a team member, okay? Now, let's take the super huge jerk feedback giver about negative patient interaction. You're a huge jerk. Stop being a jerk to the patients. Okay, if I assume the power of positive intent, I'm going to think about Billy. Okay, Billy ultimately cares about the mission of the team. Billy ultimately wants us to have a good reputation. Billy ultimately wants the patients to feel validated, right? That's why he's saying that. If I have negative intent toward Billy, I'm going to think Billy's a flippin' jerk, and all he wants to do is stir up some trouble. He doesn't care about the patients. He just cares about drama, right? The same thing is communicated, but my interpretation is all predicated on them. So I have to choose the power of positive intent. I have to choose that when he's coming at me, it may not be the best feedback I've ever heard. It may be bad feedback. It may be, come on, man, stop being a jerk. But there is goodness in the way that heart is communicated. And I'm going to choose goodness. The same is true with him receiving that feedback. Hey, man, like the way you talked to that patient was not a clue. I am not a jerk. Okay, why he's changing, right? He's a chameleon. Why he's saying that has to be from some place that's positive, right? Is it because he's defending his position? Is it because he's scared of losing his job? Whatever he's communicating, it's predicated on positivity, and it's a decision that I'm going to make personally. The other thing is the power of positive intent lends itself to being okay with not having a resolution in the moment. Okay? This issue is not big enough to warrant a compassionate conversation yet. Okay? I'm just two people communicating, hey, when I said whatever 5 minutes ago, I really feel like it didn't land well. So I'm just communicating. Let's move the needle real quick. Okay. I'm not going to walk. When I walk away from this conversation, the power of positive intent lends me to believe that now that you've received that, you're going to change. You're going to be different. Or when I walk away from the conversation as the receiver, the power of positive intent tells me the reason that person told me that is because they care about me and they care about this place. They don't think I'm a bad person. I'm giving them the benefit of the doubt. What it does is it diffuses our defensiveness and it re-emphasizes that feedback is progress, focused on the problem, not the person. I'm going to say it one more time. Feedback is progress, focused on the problem, not the person. Okay? Okay, guess what you get to do today? You get to put it into action. So, the next slide is our little minute, or I think it's 3-minute breakdown because of the 3-minute dialogue. So, what I want you to, I want you to guys get your pens and papers out. I want you to write these 3 scenarios down. You're going to buddy up with someone else, and then you're going to practice this. Okay? Here are your 4 possible scenarios. One of you gets to be the giver. One of you gets to be the receiver. Scenario number 1, you interrupted me during that meeting. So these are all of the what's not working. Scenario number 2, the patient's insurance wasn't verified before their appointment. Hannah's like, somebody preach. Scenario 3, you didn't restock that exam room before the last patient. You dirty tramp. That's not part of this. Scenario 4, your response to the patient's question sounded impatient. Okay, so you're going to partner off, and then one of you is going to choose to be the giver, and one of you choose to be the receiver. And I want the giver, do not tell the receiver which scenario you're choosing. I just want you to come out and say it. Okay? Remember does anybody need me to repeat the framework? Need is what's not working. Explore. Remember, we're going to ask their perspective. Empathize, connect with their view, and then drop the drama. And then move is how we receive. We're going to mirror what we heard, repeat what we heard. Open posture, no crossed arms. Validate means to acknowledge the value they're communicating. And then empathy, show that we get it. Okay? Feeling good about it? We partnering up? Everybody's got a partner? Raise your hand if you don't have a partner. Who wants to acknowledge they don't have friends? Okay, here we go. 3 minutes on the clock because that's all this should take. Appreciate you guys. Have a great day.